As the transfer portal and as NIL continue to muddy the waters of recruiting in college basketball, could turning to the international market be a win for Carolina?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Friday, August 2nd, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shea, joined today by our good friend, Coach Bill Robinson, head coach of the Milligan University Buffaloes basketball team and a 2-decade veteran of Carolina Basketball School, the basketball camp every summer. And you're joining us at the place to get your Carolina content every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We want to thank you for making us your first listen or watch. Also, shout out to all the everydayers joining us and all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord family. So glad to be with all of you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. In the dog days of summer, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Coming up on the show today, we want to talk about this idea of international recruiting. Carolina's been getting into a couple of international recruits, making some offers, things like that. So we want to talk about it as a viable option long-term. Carolina last weekend was on their beach trip, and so we want to talk about what that means, how that brings the team together, all of that. And with Coach being here with us, we got to get to story time, so we'll do that to wrap up the show today. Coach, I want to frame this international conversation with a question we got from our friend Jonathan in the Locked On Tar Heels Discord. Jonathan asks, or says, Carolina had a rich history under Dean Smith, especially of bringing in international players to UNC. With the recruitments of players like Johnny Furphy last year and Julius Halaifonua this year, do you see Hubert Davis bringing that tradition back? And Coach, now on the backside of that question, Carolina, since Jonathan asked, has also offered the Finnish player Miikka Muurinen as well. And so we're starting to see a little bit of that. Coach, how would you answer Jonathan's question there?
Yeah, I don't think it's something that is necessarily a focus saying, hey, we need to recruit more international kids. They just need to recruit the best players that they can get. And now the world's smaller than it was, back when I was in school. It's easier to recruit those kids. And there's so much more on social media. There's so many more contacts. The NBA Academy is doing a great job by developing more kids in other countries. So I don't necessarily say, hey, we're going to go really focus on international kids. I think we're going to go out there and get the very best kids we can. And if some of those are international kids, then that's part of it. I think that's the positive thing. The negative is you're not going to see those kids as much. You're not going to get to know those kids as much. I've got 3 kids from New Zealand. We didn't see any of them play in person before we offered them. Now, that's dangerous because film can look great. You never miss a free throw on film. We joke about that all the time. We hate when we see
or in movies, or in movies,
or in movies, exactly. So it's one of those things that there's some positive, there's some benefits. Obviously, to be able to go get those kids, but there are some negatives too. You don't get to know those kids personally or their families as much. So there is a give and take. But for the most part, right now, the kids they're talking about, they're the very, very top kids in their country. So I think they're going to hit more on those than miss.
And Coach, you kind of allude to this there, but obviously it takes a lot more of your resources, both time and money, to get into these international recruiting waters. Because there's just such a better, I don't know if I would say a more developed mechanism for domestic recruiting. So, Coach, how do you determine, whether it's you at Milligan, Coach Davis at Carolina, or anywhere in between, how do you manage or balance how much of our resources are worth it to maybe go find these untapped kids, who are diamonds in the rough that other people might not be finding, versus, hey, it's not going to take maybe as many of our resources to get to the domestic side of things, but there's going to be more of our United States of America college coaching eyeballs on those kids.
Yeah, everybody needs a Damon Stevenson, and that's what I have. I have a Damon Stevenson. Damon was a guy who coached at Winthrop, Division I. We got to become friends. He went over to Australia, coached for 10 years. So he got to know the New Zealand kids, the Australian kids really well. They sent a team from over there when Damon got back, AAU, to go to Las Vegas, LA, in a two city tour just a few summers ago now. But Damon's the guy who really connected me with the guy, Tom Grice, who's my guy over there. Tom and Juice are friends, by the way. So we're trying to find out more, if maybe kind of get some inside information about Juice and whether he's really, leaning one way or another. But Tom did tell me that he's an absolutely phenomenal kid. He's an absolutely phenomenal player. I don't think that that's somebody that Carolina's not worried about him, being a good enough player, a good enough person. They're just trying to make sure they get him into school and get that whole process done with, to be able to really get the deal done. But I think that's part of it. We obviously, as a small college, don't have the opportunity to go see those people in person overseas. So we really have to have somebody we trust. And the first one was Finn McClure. We offered him without even seeing film, just because Damon Stevenson says, you need to go get this kid, go get him. And that's what we did.
Coach, I think this has started top down, right? Like, we're in the midst of the Olympics right now. So I think back to the original Dream Team in '92 in Barcelona, and they were just demolishing people. But a lot of that is there weren't NBA players or as many on these other teams. Now in 2024, you look at the opponents that they're playing, and Team Canada, for example, literally all 12 players on Team Canada played college basketball in America. There's so many NBA guys, and not just NBA guys, like NBA superstars on these other teams. You think about a Wemby, you think about a Giannis, for example, just a couple of them, Jokic, my goodness. So it's not even just NBA guys, it's NBA studs. And so obviously that's then going to be filtering down to our ranks as we think about college basketball. And so with this globalization, Coach, you talked about the availability of social media. How do we see that talent level increasing? But how do you then go find these guys? How do you interact with them? Is it catching up in enough of a way to where you can trust that they're going to be on par with an American player? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think you still have to rely. Every NBA team's got their scouts, and they're doing more and more, obviously, international stuff. I think the contacts are right with the national coaches. I did talk to one of the UNC coaches about, how they're doing things right now. They're just one-on-one right with the international, either the U17 coach or the national team coach. They're going right straight to the source. So I don't think it's a whole lot different than what we would do here. If I want to go recruit a kid, we go right straight to the coach. So I don't think it has to be real complicated. Some of the players have teams that they're playing for over their professional teams. So then it gets complicated if they have a contract, if they have a buyout. It gets a little bit more, the waters get muddier there. But I think when it comes down to the kids, especially the younger kids, like the kid from Finland, these kids are kids that maybe you get them before they sign pro over there, and you recruit them no different than you would an American kid. It's just they're a little bit further away.
And that's you talk about Muurinen. One of the interesting things about him and many of these other players is they're now finding their way to the States in high school and playing while they're here. So Muurinen, for example, came over and played at Sunrise Academy in Wichita last year. He's going to play at Compass Prep in Arizona this year, where Zayden High played. And so, obviously that makes it infinitely easier to see them. And so I guess in some ways that helps, because now they're stateside and it's easier to get to them. But you also don't have the advantage of like, oh, we found this diamond in the rough and nobody else has their eyeballs on him. How do you reckon with that side of it?
That's the old way. The old way is that you'd find some kid in the Congo or someplace, and he's going to be 7 foot, and you bring him to the States and you hide him in a prep school somewhere where nobody knows, or you have an agreement with their people that he's going to come sign with you afterwards. Oh, that sounds like Tamba. That sounds like the kid we just got a commitment from.
About that. Yep.
Weber State, because he came over from the Congo. He got adopted by an American family, went to high school in Knoxville, signed with UT. They redshirted him, found out he wasn't good enough. They didn't think he was quite good enough to play for them. He ended up transferring to Weber. Now we've got him for 2 years. So that's more the old school way of doing it. I know Baylor used to do that quite a bit. They find those kids overseas, kind of hide them in some school outside Waco somewhere, and then all of a sudden they'd be the next great player. But it's harder and harder to be, I don't want to say sneaky, but to hide those kids, because everybody knows about those kids now, and that's why they're coming to the States and playing at some of those prep schools and getting a lot more exposure than they ever did before.
It also makes me think of is it Blue Chips where they go find homie and that's great. Oh man. Coach, any other insights you want to share or mention, or that's just on your head with this international side of things before we keep going?
Yeah, you're talking about whether they're going to make this a main focus. I don't think it's necessarily a focus, but I wouldn't be surprised if whoever the recruiting director is at Carolina, if they have somebody maybe that helps them as an assistant and say, your job is nothing more than to just make sure you know every international kid that is a possibility of playing Division I basketball. I did my internship with the Mavericks, and Keith Grant was the director of player personnel at the time, and he literally said, I know every single player in the world that is considered an NBA prospect. Sheesh. So and I'm not saying they need to do something like that, but they need to do something like that, something that they know every kid that's a very possible Division I player or is a possible NBA player in the future, and have somebody just focus on international. Have somebody focus on the domestic side, have somebody focus on the international side, because you don't want anybody to fall through the cracks anymore.
Or go to Duke or somebody else that you don't want them to. So, Coach, last year the team had an international player, Mr. James Okonkwo from England. Part of last year's success can be attributed to the level of chemistry enjoyed by that team. They worked on that very thing this past weekend. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about eBay Motors, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits to LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or you get your money back. Why? Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Hey, thanks for joining us on a Friday here on Locked On Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's hard to believe that we're into August. Football season is upon us. Great stuff happening. It's starting to pick up, and before you know it, basketball will be here. Coach, I'm getting a little bit giddy. We talked last year, and I guess I should really say the team talked so much last year about how their chemistry was a critical ingredient into what made them as great as they were. Yes, on any team, talent is what matters, and you can only go so far, if you aren't talented. But man, there's something about a team that is united, Coach, that really can take them to the next level. Before we get into the specifics of getting away to the beach together last week, can you just speak in general about that idea of how chemistry can take a team beyond its talent?
Yeah. Well, one of the big things you talk about, even just in any kind of relationship, it's all about spending time together. It's about communicating. I don't care if it's a girlfriend or if it's with your kids. You want to spend time and really get to know each other. When you get to that next level of relationship, of really caring and loving someone, it makes you want to play harder. It makes you want to do things to help them. And it develops a relationship to the point where you're willing to sacrifice self for the betterment of the team. And I think that's what these trips are really for. There's still guys who sit there saying, man, I got to get mine because I want to go play pro, or I want to go to the NBA. I got to get my numbers up. But when you care enough about somebody, you'll dive on the floor. You'll step in and take a charge. You'll do the little things. And when it comes down to getting that one stop or getting that one bucket when you really need to win, you're much more willing to do that for somebody that you love more than somebody you just kind of care about.
And so last year we saw this. I think if I'm not mistaken, that was the first time they had taken this trip with Coach Davis to the beach was last year. And obviously, I mean, players on the team reference back to that trip all season long. And coach, this happened again just this past weekend. I know the social media accounts were putting out pictures back on Saturday, July 27th there. And coach, first off, as we look at these pictures, I got to say, as a 40-year-old man, I don't know if I ever was in shape as these guys are, but I'm very jealous of their 18 to 22-year-old abs. So congrats to them. But coach, this was such a success last year. Coach Davis getting this team away to be isolated. But the actual getaway, it brought so much success, the getaway itself and the benefits it reaped. So as you talk about, coach, just this getaway, what can it do? A trip like this?
The time is the most important thing. It doesn't even matter what you're doing. Now they're doing fun stuff in the sun and enjoying that time too. But to me, it's the ride over, it's the meals, it's the having to sleep in the same. I don't know how they're doing it, whether they're doing it in a hotel or hopefully they got a huge Airbnb and they're all in the same place. But those are the things that are most important. Hubert and I talked about before his first year about doing something like this. We do a thing over break called Buff Olympics, where break. There's no classes going on. There's nothing happening. So we do ping pong, billiards, bowling, 2K, card games, dice games, anything like that, and have the teams match up. And we take the captains, and then they have a draft, and they draft everybody who's going to be involved. And for us, even including the trainer or the assistant coaches, so everybody gets on a team. But what you want to do there is to spend a bunch of time, but you want to do a little competitive stuff and see who really cares about something that means nothing. So I'd like to know. I wish I could be a fly on the wall and see if they're doing those type of things, because I know Hubert and I talked about that. But it's all about spending time, developing relationships, and not just between the players, but between the coaches. And you're developing. You do that brotherly love that you need to when things are tough, and it will be tough, and things will go wrong. When bad times come and you care about people, you might do it a lot harder.
And coach, I think perhaps that's an overlooked part of a trip like this, because obviously these young men are learning a ton about each other, what makes them tick, how to encourage one another, how to lift each other up, how do I critique you if I need to critique you, how do I praise you if I, all of those kind of things. But beyond the players learning a lot about each other, I think this is probably a moment where, like, you as a coach are learning a ton about your team. To me, that's an overlooked win of this. What are you as a coach finding out on a trip like this?
Yeah, I'll give you a situation. We had camp this past week at our place. We had a incoming freshman who came and worked camp. I sought out opportunities where it was just me and him, where I could just talk. It wasn't basketball. Who's your favorite team? What football team do you like? Do you like baseball? What classes do you have? Tell me about your family more. Tell me what your favorite meal is. But that's what you're really trying to see, because you're trying to find out more about them, just like you would the first date you went out, with your girl, and you want to make sure you're really digging into more about what makes them tick. So this kid has no interest in baseball ever. We don't talk about the Cubs. We won't talk about the Yankees or the Braves. I just make sure that we go on to something else with him. He likes soccer. Well, now maybe I need to go find out more about the European League soccer and the team that he told me he likes. And maybe now I got to go find out more, so that when I see a result and they win or lose, I can say something to him, but it gives us a connection outside of basketball, so that he knows I really do care about him more as a person. Basketball is going to end, but I want to have a relationship with that kid 30 years down the road, and still be able to call him a friend.
So one final question on this, and then we can get to story time, is obviously it's important for everyone to get to do this, even guys who were on the team last year, the 6 returning scholarship players, to continue developing their bonds and relationships. But what can a trip like this do for that young man you just talked about, an incoming freshman? There's the 3 freshmen, the 2 transfers. I'm guessing this is probably the first moment where they will truly, honest to goodness, feel like part of the tribe. You think that's an accurate statement?
Definitely. And they're going to see that they're part of a rock group. They're rock stars. So when they're out there, there's going to be people every meal, every time they get off the bus, every time they go into wherever they're staying. And some of those guys haven't experienced that yet. And this is just kind of a little foreshadowing of what it's going to be like once the season starts. But it's also when leaders develop. I think we've all questioned. I think even Hubert, we've talked about this. Who's the leader? Who's the guy that's going to step up? These are the type of experiences, this time together, where you start to see some guys start to speak up. Where even if it's something simple as, "Hey, we want Subway tonight," not Papa John's, that's my terminology. Their restaurants are obviously going to be a little bit different, but the guys who sit there and say, "Hey, we're tired of this. We want Chinese tonight, or we want Mexican tonight, or whatever," and see who really steps up as leaders who can go to the coaching staff and say, "Hey, what about this?" And the coaches take note of that. That's what we're sitting there. We're looking to see who is the one who comes and says, "Hey, can we do something different?" And the leadership will start to emerge. Somebody will rise to the top. And I think that's just as important as the chemistry is. You're getting to see really more about the personality of this team. Hubert's alluded to us before. Every year's different. Even if you have the same guys or a group of the same guys, the season's still going to be different. Everything's different. So it's important to have these things yearly to really see what you got. And to find out in August is a lot better than waiting until September, October.
That's a great point. Coach, I lied. I said that was my last question. It actually, as you were answering, brought up one more thing for me that I wanted to ask you about. It seems like perhaps a moment like this can also be like a moment that you can call back to when things are getting harried during the season or there are struggles. You can call back to a conversation you had or hey, remember when we all agreed to this when we were at the beach or something like that? How can this moment be like a flagpole in time in this season?
Yeah, I think this is when you talk about a flag. This is the start of the marathon. The season's a marathon, and even though this preseason has come, the guys have had classes and pickup and all that stuff. But this is really, I think, when it starts for real, because now everything's taken into account. Every little thing that happens, the coaches are noticing everything, and now is the flag's going down. Let's refocus when we get back to school. I guess they'll get a little bit of a break, but it's on. So, hey, this is the time where we can have a little bit of fun. But when we get back, everything we do from now on should be focused on winning and what it takes for us to be Carolina basketball.
All right. We're going to come back here in just a second. Going to have story time with Coach Rob. And one of the fun things that happens at camps is sometimes we need a coach to step in, and it might just be somebody special. We're going to get to that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. I love sports. Coach Rob loves sports. Apparently a freshman on his team loves soccer. We love them so much and we never want them to stop. But in the dog days of summer, we know there's fewer games. And the sports just don't sports like we want them to. But FanDuel, the good news is they let you keep the sports going anytime you want. All you got to do is open up the app, dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. How about some national championship odds as we start to think a little bit ahead to the end of next season? Duke, UConn, and Kansas lead the way at FanDuel plus 1,000, followed by Alabama at plus 1,300, then Houston at plus 1,600, and then come the Tar Heels along with Baylor, who Coach has talked about earlier, and Gonzaga at plus 2,000. So if you want to get in on that action with the Tar Heels, or maybe hedge your bets with one of those other schools, head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. As we set off the top of the show, Coach has been a 2-decade veteran of Carolina Basketball School, the summer basketball camp at Carolina. He is in the midst, he's on the back end now of writing a book with just stories recalling all of these summers and all this time spent there. And right now he's in the process of final edits, getting a couple final stories put in and some pictures, all sorts of great stuff. The light is at the end of the tunnel, Coach. We're cheering you on. We know you can do it. But one of the things that Coach so graciously does is often shares a story from the book in the last segment of the show. And that's exactly what he's going to do today. Coach, the floor is yours.
Yeah, these are two real quick stories. But my friend Thomas Kepley, he's a little bit older than me. He was at camp in the 70s. And he was a taller kid on the team, and his team was terrible at camp. And they kept putting him underneath the basket because he was big. And they were the Kansas Jayhawks. So it's just one of those ironic things that Kepley, actually, his dad was casual friends with Dean Smith. So Coach Smith came to the gym one night to see Thomas and make sure he said hello to him. And Thomas said, our team's bad. We haven't won a game all week. And Coach Smith said, well, let me watch you guys play for a little bit, and then we'll just kind of talk. So he watched about 5 minutes of play, and then in between games, he said, guys, I think we just need to do a little different. Why don't we try this? Why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? And a team that was 0-4, 0-5 to start the week ended up winning the championship. Just with little tweaks from Coach Smith, just here and there. And he just trains things a little way. But I think we all know Coach Smith saw the game differently than anybody else. He was able to make adjustments and changes. And I think that day Thomas got to experience how brilliant of a coach Coach Smith really was. But a few years later, in 1984, there was a young man getting ready to get drafted in the NBA. His name was Michael Jordan. And
I've heard of him.
Yeah, probably heard of him. Well, he tried to do the similar thing. He was in camp one night, and Ed McKinnon was the gym head, and he walked in and said, Ed, Coach, is there anything I can do? And Ed looked at me and goes, I think you know what's going on. Just hang out with the kids, have a good time. Well, Michael went over and started coaching the team, and the games are very, on point, on time. We don't stop for any reason. There's running clock. We may stop in the last 2 minutes for a free throw, but we got to get the games done so we can get 2 games done for every kid every night. Well, Michael didn't like what was going on, so he called timeout. Well, you don't call timeout in camp, but they gave it to him because it was Michael. And then his team still wasn't doing very well. So he called timeout again and made the kid do push-ups. And we don't want it to be a push-up camp, but when Michael Jordan says do push-ups, the kids jump down and we're pumping out push-ups real quick. And then he didn't like he called a third timeout. It was just one of these unbelievable things. And of course his team came back and they still lost because they weren't very good. But he at least tried. But he came Coach Jordan for a night. But Dean Smith had that ability to go take a bad team and make them great. Michael just kind of made them do push-ups. But they're 2 really fun stories from camp, how you're a camp kid and all of a sudden Michael Jordan or Dean Smith, your coach. So at Carolina camp, you just never know what's going to happen.
Dean Smith, coach, Michael Jordan, not so much. Put Dean Smith and Michael Jordan together in a coach-player relationship. That's a very different story. That's a national championship winning combination right there. Those are great, Coach. Thank you so much for sharing them with us. You all, man, I cannot wait for this book to come out so you can read stories just like that and others. So stay tuned for updates from Coach on that. And Coach, again, we continue to cheer you on as you finish this thing off. You guys, that's it for this week on Locked On Tar Heels. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. If you haven't subscribed to the show on audio and video, man, now's the time to do it so that you don't miss a second. And it also helps spread the good name of the show so that other people hear about it as well. If you haven't joined our Locked On Tar Heels Discord, we would love to have you, man. It's a great way to get to know people that are part of this Locked On Tar Heels community, who are checking out the show and who just love the Tar Heels. It's a safe place to be. Coach is in there. I'm in there. Coach Pat Kilby's in there. And we're hanging out, interacting as well. It's free to join, and the link is in the show notes. Come on in. The water's fine. Want to remind you, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again on Monday. Have a great weekend. But until then, peace.